All right, we are going to dismiss the children to Children's Church now. Birth through preschool is going to head to the nursery. Kindergarten through 6th grade is going to head to the fellowship hall. If you are one of our Children's Church volunteers this week, please stand up so the kids can make their way over to you now. For the rest of us, you are stuck in here with me. I apologize. But I hope that you are having a great week. We are 1 week away from Easter. That is one of the biggest holidays in the world. Out of curiosity, has anybody got a whole bunch of family coming in to celebrate Easter with you? Okay, a couple of us have a whole bunch of family coming in to celebrate Easter with us. Fair enough. I've got my grandma and my Aunt April coming to visit over Easter week, and we could not be more excited. This will be the first time that either of them have been out to North Carolina. It's a little bit bittersweet because in the year or two leading up to his death, my papa and I had been talking about him and Mima coming to visit us. They were talking about driving their mobile home up here and parking it in our yard and just staying for a week or two. It would have been one of the biggest trips they had taken in years, but then his health began to decline and they had to put a pin in that. And then in December, he really took a dive and passed away. And so we never got to come out here and meet any of you or see where we live, but I know he would have loved meeting every one of you, and he would have liked at least a handful of you. And you will all meet him at a later date when the Lord raises us up in the end and gathers us around his heavenly throne for all of eternity. I learned a lot of things from my papa, or at least he tried to get me to learn a lot of things. When I was younger, I wasn't always the most eager to listen. It's hard to teach somebody who doesn't want to learn. Know what I'm talking about? And when I was a kid, I really didn't want to learn. I really didn't want to listen to anybody. But one of the things that my papa always tried to teach me was that you need to think ahead. Anybody else's grandpa say stuff like that? Growing up, I had a tendency not to think things through. I still have a little bit of a tendency not to think things through. But he would say, Ryan, you need to think about the next step. He'd say, you cannot just drift. He'd say, you cannot just sleepwalk your way through things. You can't just fake it till you make it. He said, you have to plan. You have to prepare. You have to look ahead. Anybody get the same talking to when you were younger? I didn't like it when I was 11, but I get it now. The funny thing about grandpas is that a lot of times they'll say things in a really blunt and simple and kind of folksy way, and you'll write it off as old-timer nonsense when you're 11. And then years later, you'll find out they were exactly on the mark. Know what I'm talking about? He was trying to teach me with his grandfatherly wisdom what God is trying to teach us by his fatherly wisdom in the Proverbs. We're continuing on in our Proverbs series this morning. If you've missed the last several weeks, the Proverbs are one of the most ignored parts of God's Word, but they are also one of the most powerful parts of God's Word, one of the most valuable parts of God's Word, because in the Proverbs, God is pouring out his practical, daily, step-by-step wisdom for how to survive this fallen and broken world and how to thrive in this fallen and broken world. God is acting as a loving Father. He is working to bless us and prosper us by teaching us how to live according to His wise, created design for our world. And part of God's wise, created design for how to thrive in this world is that we are created to thrive when we are awake at the wheel, but wither when we are asleep at the wheel. Know what I'm talking about? We were created to flourish when we live intentionally, but languish when we just kind of drift through life. I love the way the Proverbs 19:2 puts it. It says, desire without knowledge is not good, and whoever makes haste with his feet misses his way. It's painting a picture of a person who is self-destructively impulsive. A person who's a slave to their impulses. Ever met somebody who was a slave to their impulses? Maybe you met somebody one time and it was you in the mirror when you were looking, right? He says the absolute worst way that you can live your life is by just kind of noticing a desire and then immediately going to satisfy it. Waking up and saying, what sounds good today? And then immediately diving into it, letting our bellies rule our lives, letting our appetites rule our lives, instead of saying, what is good for me? What will make me happy? What will help me? What will benefit me? We just kind of sleepwalk. Know what I'm talking about? We just drift through life like we're on a lazy river. We just passively react to things that happen to us. And then before we know it, we're at the end of our lives. And it's like we had no agency, no control. Proverbs says that this impulsiveness, this drifting, this sleepwalking through life will ruin your life. In the field of secular psychology, they call this having a present orientation. Ever heard that term before? What is a present orientation? It's a mindset where your natural tendency is to only really think about the present moment. Know what I'm talking about? It's a mindset where you only really think about the here and now. You only really think about the next hour, the next day. You're not thinking about the future. You're not thinking about your goals. You're not thinking about your needs. All you're really thinking about is what sounds good to you right this minute. The future, more or less, does not exist as far as you're concerned. Well into my early 20s, I was 100% stuck in a present orientation. Maybe you recognize yourself in some of what I said too. Based on some studies, as many as 60 or 70% of the people on planet Earth could be described as present-oriented people. In my experience, it's probably more like 90. Most of the people that you meet have a present orientation. What am I talking about? Here's what I'm talking about. Case in point. Most single people have no idea what they want from a partner. Most single people have no idea what they want from a partner. If you're a single person, listen carefully. Most single people say, I want to settle down and spend my life with someone. They say, what kind of person do you want to spend your life with? And they're like, somebody hot? Okay. Well, most couples, based on data from almost every major marital counseling organization in the US, say they have never talked about the kind of life they want together. Know what I'm talking about? Handful of folks have been married for like 10 years, like, oh no. They ever talked about what kind of future they envision? That literally prior to getting married or prior to moving in together, they have literally never talked about whether they want kids, where they want to live, what kind of lifestyle they want to lead. These are the things that are vital to your ability to be able to hold together and build a satisfying life as a couple. But the overwhelming majority of couples have never talked about any of those things. Why is the divorce rate almost 60%? I don't know, man. Maybe it's because we never figured out if we were actually compatible. That's a present orientation. Here's another one. Data from a study found that the average low-wage worker, the average minimum wage worker, the average person living paycheck to paycheck, that's most of the people in the US, according to data. The average person struggling with significant degrees of debt or bills they can't pay. Once again, that is the majority of the people in the US, according to 2024 data. The average person over the age of 30 specifically. We are not talking about 18-year-olds right out of high school. The average person over the age of 30 struggling with money issues. People who've been in the workforce 12 to 15 years say they have never thought to research lucrative fields to try to get into. They say it never occurred to them at any point growing up to look at the job market, find what jobs tend to pay well, tend to have upward mobility, tend to bring success and security, and then pursue those. The overwhelming majority claim that they just kind of drifted through school and then drifted into whatever job would take them and never even thought to search for something better. Why are the poverty rates so much higher in America than almost every other developed nation? There's a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is we literally never taught kids to think about the future. That's present orientation. Here's another one. Same thing is true for college students. I'm going to get autobiographical here. When I was in college, I just kind of bounced around to different things. I was definitely a present orientation kid. That was not my parents' fault. They did everything they could. I wasn't having it, but I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But when I was in college, most of the other students were exactly like me. Most of the kids I talked to had no idea what they wanted to do with their lives. All they knew is that they were supposed to be in college because that is what you do. That's the rule. My generation kind of got shafted by the education system. They fire hosed it into us from kindergarten on that you need to go to college right now or else you will be poor and die. Know what I'm talking about? So now, 35% of people between the ages of 25 and 35 have a graduate level degree and work at Starbucks. And so when I was in college, you would meet somebody and say, hey, it's nice to meet you. So, why are you here? And they would say, my parents said I had to be here. That's the why. They spent $80,000 for no specific purpose. That is a present orientation. We could go on and on and on, but I think the picture is painted. Some social scientists theorize that present orientation is responsible for the overwhelming majority of the major struggles that we experience as Americans. The data is extremely clear. The overwhelming majority of long-term, chronic, severe poverty is at least in some way related to present orientation. The overwhelming majority of relationships and marriages that fall apart after 5, 10, 15, 20 years are at least in some way related to what? Present orientation. The majority of addictions that run rampant. And just to be clear, I have been here too. I'd be willing to bet that very few people in this room have not struggled with some kind of addiction. I don't want you to raise your hand, but I want you to recognize most of the people in a room of 50 people have probably been addicted to something at some point. So I'm talking about me just as much as anybody else. But the overwhelming majority of addictions that we find ourselves caught in the cycle of ultimately come down on some level to our present orientation. We know that this substance is going to harm us, don't we? We know going to that website is going to harm us, don't we? We know that this wildly unhealthy thing is going to harm us, and yet we cannot get out of the feedback loop of living for this present moment. I need the rush now. I need the dopamine now. Future be damned. Social scientists call that present orientation. And the problem with present orientation is that it has a tendency to ruin our freaking lives. Know what I'm talking about? Present orientation will ruin your life if you let it rule over you. It has ruined so many parts of my life through the years in the past that it's taken years to rebuild and rehabilitate. And I would be willing to bet that if you are anything like me, and a lot of you are, right? It has probably done all kinds of havoc to yours too, hasn't it? Drifting through life will ruin your life. That's the bad news. Here's the good news. The opposite is also true. The Proverbs tell us that drifting through life leads to failure, but they also tell us that thinking ahead leads to flourishing. That sleepwalking through life leads to withering, but planning for the future leads to thriving. That floating down the lazy river through life leads to languishing, but taking control leads to flourishing. I love Proverbs 21:5. It says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. Proverbs 24:27, it says, prepare your work outside, get everything ready for yourself in the field, and after that, build your house. Stop for a second and think about the image that Proverbs 24 just painted. There's two ways to build a house. One way to build a house is just dive straight in, right? Just grab the things you have on hand, start hammering them together. When you do that, you build a weird, abortive monstrosity that nobody can actually live in, right? But another way to build your house is to make a plan. You draw out your blueprints. You gather your material. You get your crew together. And then you go do it. And when you do that, you build a pretty good house. You could build with a present orientation so your house falls down, or you can build with a future orientation so that your house stands strong. I love Proverbs 6:6-8. It says, go to the ant, O sluggard. We need to bring back that insult. That is an awesome insult. Don't call me lazy. Call me a sluggard. I'll respect you. It says, go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. Once again, take a second and think about the image God is painting. Proverbs says, man, you know who humans should be more like? You're like ants. When I was 19 years old, I did not give a moment's thought to the future past about next week. I just kind of drifted through everything, just reacted to every new crisis that came on me, every new disaster that came on me. I just dealt with it moment by moment, day by day, one thing at a time, and my results were usually not very good. But not ants, man. Ants go out far and wide. They gather food. That's what they're doing in your house. It pisses you off, but they're actually being smart. They break into your house, they gather supplies, they take them back to the anthill, they store them up, so when winter comes, they can't gather anything, but they've got food, they've got supplies, they can survive the harsh season. It says, man, ants don't need to be told what to do. Ants don't need somebody to yell at them from a pulpit. Ants will stop, look, think, and then act. Proverbs says most of our problems would go away if we were a little bit more like ants. Because ants understand something called delayed gratification. Ever heard that term before? Ants understand something that's called contingency planning. Ever heard contingency planning before? It's where you say, my plan is to do this, but if that happens, I'm going to do this. And if that happens, I'm going to do this. And if that happens, I'm going to do this. I have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. In the field of secular psychology, they call this having a future orientation. I accidentally said the word before the big reveal earlier. I apologize. Totally ruined the dramatic flow of the sermon. But you can probably guess exactly where I'm going with this. A person with a future orientation is what? Someone who considers the future. It's someone who plans for the future. If you have a future orientation, you are someone who prioritizes the future. You make your decisions based on what you think is going to create the best possible future for yourself. A future orientation means that you think about the long-term outcomes that you want in life, and then you take very purposeful steps towards making those outcomes happen. If you have a future orientation, it means you go out of your way to imagine the future that you want, and then you think about what it's going to take to get there. So if you have a future orientation, it means that you are someone who is going to set concrete goals and then think through what you need to do to achieve them. If you have a future orientation, more importantly than anything, you are going to look at the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, and say, where do I want to be? Who do I want to be? What kind of life do I want for myself, for my family, for my kids, for my community? And then you delay gratification in whatever ways you need in order to make that happen. So, case in point, you say, I want to retire at 60 instead of dying on the job at Walmart when I'm 90. So I need to put money away right now and do it every single month so I can make that possible, right? You say, I want to leave my kids an inheritance instead of leaving my kids a devastating mountain of debt. Some of you inherited a devastating mountain of debt from your parents, didn't you? Did you like that? No. You want to do the same for your kids? No. You say, so I'm going to build a concrete budget today to make that possible starting now. You say, I want to be running my own business, owning my own company. I want to be employing other people and creating jobs for other people. So I'm going to spend as much of my free time as I can learning how to do that right now. I'm going to go find somebody else who has run a successful business and see if they'll apprentice me and mentor me and take me under their wing so that I can figure out what I'm doing. You say, I want to marry somebody who's going to help me create a safe and stable and loving environment for my kids, because I didn't have an environment like that when I was growing up. And so when I date somebody, I'm not just looking for the sexiest person imaginable. I saw the Johnny Depp, I ruined the joke. I saw the Johnny Depp court case. It didn't go well for him. So I'm going to make my moves accordingly. I'm not just looking for somebody I'm going to have fun with. I'm not just looking for somebody I find interesting or exciting. I'm looking for somebody with character, right? If you're a woman, you say, I am not going to let some scumbag deadbeat put a baby in me. If you're a man, you say, I'm not going to let some unstable, manipulative woman trap me. If you're a woman, you say, I'm going to find a father for my children who is not going to go out for milk and never come back, who's not going to hide money so he can get out of alimony payments. If you're a man, you say, I'm going to find a mother for my children who is not going to scar them for life. You say, what kind of life do I want for myself? And then you bend all of your decisions, all of your choices, all of your priorities, all of your values toward making that future, that life, a reality. That's called a future orientation. And here's the thing. Here's the reason we are talking about all of this. People who can learn to live with a future orientation typically end up having a vastly more fulfilling life. Studies consistently show that people who can delay gratification in order to achieve their goals usually achieve them. Know what I'm talking about? Studies show that people who proactively plan for things that could go wrong, who have a plan A, plan B, and plan C, typically have significantly lower levels of anxiety. They found that people who plan out each day when they wake up experience about 33% less stress. How do they measure that? I don't know. The Harvard Health team found that people who plan out their health routines in advance, that means they plan out what their diet's going to be. They plan out what they're going to eat for this week. They plan out what kind of exercise routine they're going to have. They're 46% more likely to meet those goals, lower their cholesterol, get out of being pre-diabetic, prevent major coronary problems, stuff like that. They found the Institute for Family Studies did a thing where they gathered up all of the relevant data they could get their hands on the state of marriage and divorce in America. And they found that people who proactively do things like premarital counseling and premarital planning, couples that sit down and say, how do we want to raise our kids? Who say, what parenting style do we want to use? How do we want to plan an average week? Do we want to have people over a lot? Or do we want our home to be kind of a sanctuary for just us? How do we want to handle our money? How much do we want to save? How much do we want to invest? How much do we want to spend? People who do that sort of thing have a 31% lower divorce rate. The Financial Planning Association found that people who create a reasonably detailed budget, does not have to be complex, does not have to be fancy, literally just has to be a budget where you write down roughly what you make and you write down roughly how it's spent, are 62% more likely to be financially secure than those who don't. And that is true even when they factored in income levels. A family of four who makes $50,000 but keeps a detailed budget is statistically more likely to be financially secure than a family of three who makes $100,000 a year but just spends money without paying attention, just drifts through their spending. A lot of people think they're poor because of taxes. A lot of people think they're poor because of inflation. Some people are. Most people are poor because we spend with no idea how much we're spending, what we're spending on. We got to be honest with ourselves. But the picture is unbelievably clear. As weird as this sounds, planning brings rest. Preparing brings rest. Looking forward brings rest. Being awake at the wheel is actually so much more restful than being asleep at the wheel. Know what I'm talking about? For some of us, everything I just say sounds wrong. For some of us, planning out your life sounds exhausting, right? The reality is that what you're currently doing is exhausting. I'm going to say that again. What you're currently doing is exhausting. Isn't it? Like, take a step back and really look at your situation. Drifting through life has invited so much chaos into our homes. It's invited so much chaos into our marriages. It's invited so much chaos into our work, into our friendships, hasn't it? Drifting through life is the thing that makes life complicated, not planning. You worry about money because you don't have a freaking budget. You worry about if your marriage is going to make it because you guys still haven't sat down and decided what kind of life you want to have together. You worry about if you're ever going to go anywhere in life because you still don't actually know where you want to go in life. And that's been sabotaging you for years, maybe decades. You haven't even noticed it because you thought what you were doing was normal. Am I hitting home with some of us? Like, here's a really ugly truth. So many of us came from families that were warped and messed up by generation after generation of drifting. Know what I mean? Our families drifted from one generation to another, and it left us hopelessly in debt, or hopelessly dysfunctional, or hopelessly beaten down. Some of us grew up in families where our parents literally taught us to be helpless, to be victims, to be pawns of whoever is in office or in authority at a given time, to be complacent in our poverty, to be abusive toward our children, to be impossible to be around, impossible to have a relationship with. We've had a running stable of wildly unhealthy partners, boyfriends, girlfriends cycling through our house, doing terrible things to us, putting our kids in bad situations because our mom and dad did exactly the same thing. So we didn't even know that's not normal. A lot of people out there say things like, you can't trust women. Women will backstab you. No, man, the women you choose keep backstabbing you. Suck less at choosing women. A lot of people say you cannot trust men. Men are all cheaters. Men will all leave you. No, the men you keep choosing are cheaters who will leave you. Stop choosing those men. Stop choosing those women. But it's hard because our mom and dad did the same thing. And their mom and dad did the same thing. And so it feels like we are stuck in a family curse, doesn't it? You ever heard that term before? Feels like we're stuck in a family curse. We come from a family that has drifted and sleepwalked into passing on one family curse after another to us. And it is exhausting, isn't it? And at this point, you've just sort of resigned yourself to the idea that this is just what life is going to be for you. Am I hitting close to home? Here's the gloriously good news. It does not have to be that way anymore for you. Because listen, the Lord sees you, and listen, He does not condemn you. God is not condemning you for the ways that you have drifted into self-destructive lifestyles. God is not condemning you for the ways that you have sleepwalked into carrying on the family curse. Know what I'm talking about? God is not condemning you for the ways that you just carried on autopilot to the point that it has jacked up your life, set your kids up for failure, made you feel hopeless or helpless. God is not condemning you for any of those things in your past. He's reaching out to you right now, not with wrath, not with judgment, not even with criticism. He is reaching out to you with grace. Do you believe that? I'll prove it to you. James chapter 1 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, if any of you lacks wisdom, if any of you lacks discernment, if any of you have drifted through your life, sleepwalked into cycle after cycle of needless suffering, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without criticizing, who gives generously to all without what? Criticizing. And he will give it to him. Your life up to this point may have been an absolute freaking train wreck. But God isn't even criticizing you for it. He's reaching out to liberate you, to free you, to pull you out of the pit, to break your chains, to restore your hope. The Lord is here to break every addiction. He's here to raise you up and exalt you. He's here to glorify himself by setting you free. Let him. But all of those things are on the other side of learning to break the drifting cycle. Some of us are not going to like what I'm about to say. But whatever your natural tendencies are, you need to become a planner. Whatever your baseline personality is, you need to become someone who thinks about the future. That does not mean that every moment of your life needs to be pre-scheduled. For some of us, that sounds like prison, right? That does not mean that absolutely every detail of your life needs to follow a rigid script. That sounds like hell on earth for some of us, right? The reality is that some people are more naturally oriented towards planning things out. Some people are more naturally oriented towards going with the flow, and there is nothing wrong with either of those things. But whatever our starting point is, we need to learn healthy rhythms. We need to learn to live the way God created us to live. And the way God created us to live is to be awake at the wheel. Here's what that looks like. Number one, you live awake at the wheel when you live out a sense of purpose. How do you plan like Jesus? How do you cut through the noise and the static like Jesus? You do it by asking yourself, what are my values? What do I think is important? What is important to me? Now, real quick, side note, I am not asking what's important to your mom. That's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking what's important to your grandma. I'm not asking what's important to your culture. I'm not even asking what's important to your pastor, which is funny because I'm your pastor. I'm asking what's important to you. Forget about all the other stuff. You do not have to live the same kind of life your family of origin did. You don't. You do not have to take on the family farm. You do not have to go into the family business. You do not have to go become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever to make them proud. You're not in a Disney movie where by the end you learn the truth was in you all along. You need to ask yourself, what do you value? Ask yourself, what am I passionate about? What makes my heart come alive? Ask yourself, what is the passion God has given me specifically? What has the Lord uniquely crafted me to find unbelievably important? What is the purpose God has hand knit me to be drawn to? I'm going to get a bunch of angry letters from parents saying, I've been training my kid to go into this field for years, and now they're going to do this instead. I'm not sorry. You need to deal with it. But ask yourself, how do I honor the Lord and find joy in my work life? How do I honor the Lord and find joy with my money? How do I honor the Lord and find joy in my marriage? How do I honor the Lord and find joy with my health? How do I honor the Lord and find joy with my hobbies, with my friendships in my neighborhood? That is step number one. Find your purpose. And then you ask, what should my goals be based on my purpose? Step number two. You need to be unbelievably specific here. Vague goals are not goals. Vague aspirations are useless. I want to be rich. That's a meaningless goal. What does that mean? What does rich look like? What kind of rich do you want to be? I want a nice family. That is a meaningless goal. What exactly do you want for your family? Do you want to be a family who eats together every day? Do you want to be a family who has some kind of family worship a few times a week? Do you want to be a family where your kids feel safe and loved? Do you want to be a family that puts more value on quality time together than on making more money so the kids can grow up affluent? You need to be extremely specific about what you mean here. Let your sense of purpose put flesh on the bones of your goals and then write them down. Goals that only live in your head do not exist. You need to hold yourself accountable by putting pen to paper. You need to write them down so they are out there in the world, not just in your head. And then sit down, take 30 minutes or an hour or 3 hours, whatever it takes. Do it in multiple sessions if you need to. But write down exactly what you need to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 26, step 59, step 117 in order to turn that goal into a reality. Ask, what do I need to remove from my life because it's blocking me from getting there? What do I need to let go of today so I can have the joy that I'm looking for tomorrow? What do I need to deny myself right now? What do I need to delay gratification on right this minute so I can have genuine satisfaction in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years when I accomplish these God-given goals? That is step number 2. Set your goals based on your purpose. And then ask the people you trust to hold you accountable. We keep on using that word accountable, which is funny because Americans hate to be accountable. Tell your friends, I want to build a family like this. That means I need to marry a person like that. And if I start dating a person who's a million miles away from this, you need to give me hell about it. Tell your friends, I want to give my future family financial security, so I need to go into one of these fields because these are the most secure and lucrative fields that are out there right now. I am not going to get distracted and major in feminist dance interpretation or gender critical bagpipe studies, no matter how passionate I get about it. I will do that on the side as a hobby, but I'm learning computer coding instead. And if I start to drift away from that course, you need to love me enough to sit me down and put me back on track. You need to ask your people to help you. Say, this is my purpose. These are my goals. Please hold me accountable for sticking to them. You were created to find your purpose, pursue your goals, and then ask for help from the people you trust. Listen, that is the pathway out of chaos. There's not another one. That is how you cut through the noise. That is how you cut through the static. That is how you cut everything out of your life that is making you wither instead of thrive, that is making you languish instead of flourish. And so God's word gives us an unbelievably simple calling, but it's a calling that upends almost everything we have been taught by this fallen and broken world. At the very core, what God is calling us to do is to search ourselves and think about what is truly important to us, and then throw ourselves into pursuing those things one step at a time until the chaos that comes from sleepwalking through life has given way to the peace of taking control through the power of God's Spirit working in us. And so what I want to do now, before we respond in worship and head to our community groups, is I want to close out this portion of the service by praying all of this over you. And so if you would, please bow your heads with me and close your eyes. Let's pray. Father, you've seen us suffering as a result of our drifting. You've seen us suffering as a result of our sleepwalking. You've seen us suffering as a result of generations of drifting along a kind of lazy river, taking up the same wildly destructive patterns, wildly destructive habits, wildly destructive attitudes, wildly destructive lifestyles that we inherited from our parents or our culture. And you want to rescue us from that. Please pull us out of that pit. Empower us to break that cycle. Fortify us, make us resilient, put steel into our spines, and enable us to start walking the other direction, to start living a very different way. Transform us from the inside out, beginning today, and be glorified by that radical transformation. And all of God's people said, amen. If you would now stand as we respond in worship through song.